Cheers. All right, to our seed round.
So our seed round, that was a lot of work.
Was a lot of work, so I guess we can tell everyone a little bit about the scene behind the scenes. But I've been asked a shit ton already, so we could have an exclusive here. What's our valuation? Do you want to share it?
We can share valuation.
I think you could. I think I also could. So
All right. So
the viewers might want to know.
okay. So it was above 100 and below 200. How's that?
I mean,
Close enough.
close enough.
All right.
Okay.
Everybody can do the math.
So I feel like I obviously
So wait. The reason is why. Because all right.
yeah. So this is it. So I'm getting a lot of that's a very high valuation.
So it was a very high valuation.
Yeah.
Why will you take such a high valuation?
Yeah.
And the main reason is that I can sell 100 million of anything. So I'm not as scared of 100 million. If the valuation was 300 or like 250, I would be super scared because like I haven't like that. We're too early for such a high valuation.
Mhm.
100, I can sell 50, I can sell 100 of whatever. So
Okay.
like I'm not scared of that number.
Okay. So would you say so? I mean, I was
I
just saying this.
can walk out of that valuation.
Do you think you could have got a higher valuation?
I think we could have,
Mhm.
but remember we had this conversation how sales is a game of confidence.
Yeah.
I didn't have the confidence for a higher valuation.
Okay.
Our product, remember the story, right? So we got that term sheet.
Yep.
When we show a product that was a half demo, if not more.
Yeah. So
Was
I
a
mean,
lot of demo. Right?
yeah. So maybe we can talk about actually like how our seed round came about because we started January 8th. I remember we were in an Airbnb.
Yep.
Like four of us, and we started building. We had a launch event in March, right?
Yep.
And from that launch event, that kicked off our seed round.
Yep.
And okay, so it was I gave a demo at this, and that demo was I'd say maybe 60% there, but there was a lot of a lot of stuff that wasn't there. But I think it sort of told the idea.
But it is interesting because this is one of the things that I'm learning in paid that I didn't know at outreach. And then this is sort of like one of the things that is new for me is that you in particular have this conviction that if something doesn't work right away, it will work in a couple months.
Yes.
And that is the way to play this wave. Whereas in the past, if something didn't work, we're like, oh my God, it's gonna be a moat, and we'll like spend all this time building it. And like on the other hand, like you come out with something that is somewhat differentiated, maybe not, but you spend a lot of time building it. Here, if something doesn't work, show it anyway, because it's gonna work eventually.
Yeah, and actually on this as well, there is an element of that where you don't see this before you see it. I've done a little bit of work to front load the risk.
Yeah.
So if you see it, I'm pretty confident it can work. And the greatest example of this was blocks.
Yes.
So blocks is sort
I
of
thought you were gonna say open telemetry, but blocks is good.
but actually I didn't think I thought it was actually I was like, seems pretty straightforward.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was shitting my pants the entire time.
Oh really?
No, I was like, how we're gonna make this work?
I feel like no. So obviously I'm using a lot of these sort of tools already, right? So I'm seeing how sort of telemetry works, and one of the things I love to do is apply something that works somewhere else to paid. Actually, Manny and his family came over to dinner at my place, and we started talking about parenting styles and Montessori. And then that goes, I was like, that's kind of how we run paid. They said, so there's sort of a lot of concepts like those.
Concepts like that.
But yeah, open telemetry was a pretty simple one. It's like, oh, we can kind of see everything some code does. It's not too many steps to see how we can use that to determine the behavior of an agent. And on this as well, I find that there's a lot to be said for doing stuff that people are not doing.
Mm.
So there is a lot of work being done to understand code. So, cold code is an example, but I can name about 10 companies doing this. But what you'll find is there's more to code than just reading the code. You actually need to understand it in an execution context.
That is really
Right.
hard.
Yeah. So, and especially like the majority of new code, my guess is going to be running in TypeScript.
Yeah.
And that what you see in the code does not necessarily match what is happening in production.
Right.
So being able to sort of have a tap into that, I was like, the question I asked myself was, how can we understand what an agent is doing? So yeah, you sort of think about like the telemetry aspect of it,
Yeah.
and then it kind of sort of writes itself. I think blocks was a little more interesting, where you see stuff like Lovable and Replit in this
Yeah.
sort of little space. You also understand, first of all, they've got a few months on us, a few years actually,
Yeah.
and also they have a team.
Yep.
We had Z, who we were desperate to hire. Remember, we were like, we had said no to about like 20 people.
Oh my god, that was pretty rough.
In desperation, I posted on LinkedIn, and yeah, he gets in touch. Hang out. I was like, okay, seems to work. And yeah, he came essentially, I don't know, makes Liverpool look bad. He like, kind of got it there himself.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so funny how so much of company building is luck.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we all want to believe that we did a lot of the work, but you know, luck benefits the prepare, right? So like we were prepared to take on somebody like Z at that point because we have race and we kind of knew where we were going, and like we just needed a big unlock of like what is the implementation of blocks look like.
Yeah.
But it's still luck. Like
I think that like when I think about the luck, it is luck, right? But then I feel like when you accept that it is luck, and actually what I say is probably useless. Like, very much, if I have an idea, there's a good chance it's going to go in the bin. Most ideas do.
yeah,
But if you could just throw enough shit at the wall, you give yourself enough chances to be lucky. And I think that's one of the things we're doing pretty well at Paid,
yeah.
where, our rate of shipping is pretty good. But I know we were talking about this before. How do you sort of feel like it was different in the sort of early days compared to outreach in the sort of shipping side of things?
Yeah, so let me tell you what was the same, and then I'll tell you what was different. So it was the same in that we were looking for product market fit. So we were shipping a lot very quickly and
Mhm.
tried to sell it. Um, it was the same in that, we will put in the hours, etc. It was different in that I didn't, we didn't have confidence at the very beginning because we were new to the game, new to
Yeah, yeah.
sales, new to a lot of things. So we didn't have a lot of cash in the bank. So like,
Mhm.
for us, it was a matter of survival.
Yep.
Here we have more time to like design the future we want to build.
Mhm.
You see what I mean? Because our pre-seed was 10 million
Yep.
and our seed right now is 21 million. So like you can do the math. That's enough money for 11 people to last a very long time, especially if you make revenue right away.
Yep.
So we're more intentional about what we're building and we're more intentional about the rate of shipping and experimenting. And one of the things that I love about, what you're doing with the team is that the you don't consider the time that somebody spends building something as precious. You
Mhm.
consider winning precious.
Yep.
You consider getting a customer precious. So the time that you take to iterate to get to that point is just reps.
Yep.
You see what I mean? As opposed to like when we were building outreach, we consider the time a developer spent doing something as to be super precious and the most valuable thing.
Mhm.
When in reality, winning is the most valuable thing.
So this is interesting as well. You say I think about winning, and I think that I see this mistake so often, right? Like you'll find some person has an idea, they hire this cracked engineer, but it's a situation in which that engineer has been operating. Like Google has different problems to Paid.
Right.
So I feel that like essentially sort of reprogramming where it's like, there's a lot of sort of best practices
Yep.
and essentially nonsense that engineers do. And I think it's misalignment. I think that you say, I'm interested in winning. Yes, but also I feel like everyone who works here is interested in winning.
Right.
And that makes it super easy because it means that, you and I are going to fuck up. That's going to happen.
Right. 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 Right.
And I'm pretty confident when it does, someone on the team is going to call us out on it. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud of. It's like,
100%.
um, you know, if we're not with the culture, I'm pretty sure someone's going to call us out on it.
Right.
And yeah, I think we pushed that. So I think that's pretty sweet.
I think, and because we're being so slow and deliberate about hiring and making sure that, the best analogy that I know is that, when you're a leader, you're a bit of a gardener. You're sort of like making sure that the soil around the plant is ready, that they get enough water, enough sun, and that you're pulling out the weeds around them so that they grow. As opposed to like, you're, you know, in the middle of the fight with everybody else, like you start like that, but eventually you start stepping back and just like making sure that your gardening is all flourishing and is all beautiful. And that's what culture is like. You sort of like grow, make the right incentives and the right environment for everybody to grow into what you want it to become.
And I think that there's like an interesting thing here that I think a lot about is removing the fear.
Mm,
So I actually think that like every time I sort of see in my career, I've not seen this at Paid, but underperformance essentially.
yeah.
People not getting shit done. Sometimes it's ability, but I actually think that we would probably screen that out during an interview. We'll probably understand that this person doesn't have the ability.
Mm.
So actually, if someone is here, they definitely have the ability. And what you'll find is sometimes it's a case of getting over the fear.
Interesting.
because when you think about sort of fear, we go for high achievers. They're potentially not used to sort of failing,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, there's a lot of failing at that game.
100%. 100%. So this is really interesting because I actually, so two things. So first of all, because outreach, came out of a pivot and we, like, if we didn't make money, we're going to die kind of thing, right? We had a lot of fear in us when we like started. Like I would, okay, I can't speak for my co-founders, but I had a lot of fear in me of just a straight up fail,
Yep.
right? And it took me a while to get out of this fear mode.
Mhm.
And it's interesting restarting again,
Yep.
with a company that is generationally different than when I started outreach.
Yeah.
How fear is not as much of a motivator as the potential winning is.
Oh yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
like I can see in like a couple of even our own interactions.
I feel like this. You know what? We've clashed on this
Yeah.
a few times. We've had a few of our bigger arguments have been around this.
100%. And I feel
Yeah.
like that has been a huge unlock, at least for me,
Yeah.
in that the old method of me, like, sometimes I would freak out and like that would, I'm sometimes I'm not self-aware. So like I do instill fear in people. Just won't work. You see what I mean? Whereas setting the sights on the big goal and the ability to win and the fact that the goal is there and it's massive, it's way more of a motivator. You see what I mean? The downside of failing.
Do you know where I actually got this from?
Uh-huh.
There was a documentary. It's really good. It's called Sunderland Until We Die, I think, and it's about a football team called Sunderland, where most of my management is learned from football, and there's this one.
England is incredible that has a ton of failing teams and that have a big, rabid fans.
Oh yeah, it's
Division whatever 4.
oh
I'm
my.
here for you.
Let me tell you, I support Coventry, and it's fucking rough. It's the hope is what gets you.
I know I exactly every year.
Yeah, it's like why we're so miserable because we have to deal with football. It's so there was this like striker who was like a bit past his prime, had some stuff to give, but wasn't in the zone. And he was doing a session with a sports psychologist, and he was like, "You're going through all of these calculations in your head and stuff like that. You got to be loose. You got to drop it all, and that you do your best work when you're loose."
Yeah, yeah.
And then something you probably don't know about me, maybe 4 or 5 years back, no, but maybe a little less than that, I decided I want to do a backflip. And we can have some supplementary material of me doing a backflip.
That with it.
And then one day
The
my
visuals.
my coach said to me, he's like, "Raj, you're trying too hard to do a backflip. Like, you just got to do it. You know exactly what to do." And I was like, it was one of those. It was like you got to just again be loose and sort of do your best work. And I'm like, okay, that is true.
Yeah.
You can think about it, sort of driving lessons and stuff like that. And like, no one's gonna do their. Here's the other thing where like you can win through fear,
Yeah.
right? Like there are a lot of companies that will sort of like look at Goldman, right? That's an incredibly successful company. I don't think that like it's probably people are there.
I mean, it's so funny because so one of the other things that happened at Outreach is that there's a lot of influence of the Tony Robbins crew,
Right. Okay.
because we hired the CRO, and one of the things that really stuck with me is that when you're driving and you're staring and you're saying don't hit the pole,
Mhm.
and then you're now staring at the pole as opposed to the road, and you're focused on the thing that you don't want to do, but now you're focused on the thing that you don't want to do.
Yep.
You do the thing that you don't want to do. Fear is kind of like that. It was like failure is kind of like that. You focus so much on not failing
Yep.
that you fail.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you focus so much on winning, you start seeing winning patterns
Yeah.
in front of you, and then you head towards the winning as opposed towards the failing.
And also like the victory stack and the
Mhm.
failure stack as well, right?
Right.
And like when you get into that failure stacking, that's dark. That fucking sucks.
It does.
And I saw this actually in my last startup, right? It's like we have a different story. My last startup like burned. And there was actually during raising our round, there was a lot of reflection for me because it was sort of I was in similar meetings, they were just going very differently. Right? There was like before I'm going into a meeting, I'm like, oh please find us. You walk in, first of all, some of them have literally got you fucking Ecuadorian food. They like these guys are trying these guys are trying to give you they're trying to give you money, and they want to give you money so hard. They have found the one fucking Ecuadorian restaurant in London. So they're feeding you, right? And then you stand up like fuck, no one expected that. You're walking around doing it, and it's like yeah, the whole situation is different as well, right? You're there, you're like, okay, I'm gonna get funded.
Right.
It's just, did you guys get the privilege to do it?
100%.
Um,
I mean, it's so funny because like that is a mindset. it's a little like overplayed, but like the mindset of abundance really works. Like
Yeah.
if you think about funding as like there will be a bag of money for me,
Hmm.
it may be coming for you, but who knows? Maybe it comes from somebody else. But there will be a bag of money at the end of the rainbow, and like it's just a matter of like getting it.
Yep.
It's I mean like you don't even doubt the
Hmm.
fact that there isn't at the other end.
Yeah. I think that I think is probably been one of the biggest things for me, actually,
Mm.
in terms of there's definitely been sort of a lot of growth for myself. And the two main things have been, I think, the ability to have difficult conversations. I've gotten much better at, and be not like assuming I'm going to win, but I'm feeling very good
Right.
about sort of winning. And it's like, not because I think like what we're doing is perfect, even not because I necessarily believe that hypothesis. I do,
Yeah.
but knowing that we have the team and we have the set of people that anything we're going to do, we're going to be successful in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like super good about that. And I think that coming back to the sort of the size of the round, it gives you that space, it gives you that confidence, and I think it also sends the world a message like we're not here to fuck around.
100%.
So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
100%. And I think that it allows us to play for keeps
Hmm.
as opposed to play for like a small wins, a small like let's make it to the next round and then we'll see.
Hmm.
I am done doing that. Like
Yeah.
the whole like we're gonna build a small tool that fits this little market and like we're gonna go from there. You never fucking grow from there.
Hmm.
So like my favorite story is when it's like the whole founding of Rippling.
Okay.
And
Oh,
and
yep.
like this guy, like you can call it a revenge startup or whatever, but I don't see it as that. I see it as that you have all these learnings from Zenefits that you're gonna go out and apply to
Hmm.
the next startup. And you're gonna be very comprehensive about the surface area that you intend to take. And even if you start with this particular thing, you're gonna take the whole thing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And there's no doubt in your mind that you're gonna take the whole thing. So for us, we're gonna take the whole of the back end and back offices for agent builders and then
Um,
buyers.
on the Zenith, I forgot the founder's name. I don't know if you have it here, but
Parker,
yes, Conrad Parker.
Conrad Parker.
Yeah. So he ripping was YC, and Dalton Cadwell, who was in my sort of group, would tell us sort of stories about sorry, and very similar to actually paid in the early days. Complete demoware. They're like, how the fuck did you get this shipped? They're looking at it and they're like, turns out didn't exist.
Right.
I think it was almost potentially one of someone behind the scenes actually doing stuff to get it to sort of work. But like
Amazing.
this, it comes back to the theory. Like fundamentally, building the thing is not necessarily that hard. If you gave me a set of requirements or user stories,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
said build this, and you have $100 million company, I would be crushing it. And in fact, that's not the hard part. As long as you can sort of hire the right people, that will
Right,
get
right,
done.
right, right.
It's about executing on that. So I think that that's probably one of the things that's probably as you sort of get, I guess, more senior as an engineer, you realize that engineering in itself is not that important.
Mm.
You get, what you're actually doing is translating the real world to sort of a linear set of steps, which is a program.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually now sort of in the world of AI, where core code is blowing my mind day after day, you have to say, what is this? Where is the space that we fill?
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, it's not writing code.
Right, 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 right.
Whereas like it might, some people will put their hands up and like someone posted on your LinkedIn about sort of agents replacing labor.
Uh-huh.
And it sucks for the people
Yeah, yeah.
who that. And side note, they had open to work on there. Which guys, okay, for the viewers out there, if you want a job, please do not fucking put open to work on there.
No.
That is a one signal saying this guy really needs a job.
Play hard to get.
Screams desperation.
That's the easiest way to do it.
But I think the real interesting thing when I think about that is like, I'm probably agree with that guy. Like, I'm not sure that agent replacing, like, there is a future where that's really bad for people. But the reality is, the industry doesn't care. It's happening.
Right, 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 right.
So I think one of the things that I find really interesting about Paid is like, and my personal relationship with Paid is that we get to have a say in how this happens.
Mm.
And I think in one of your previous podcasts with Amjad from Replit, you talk about, we want lots of millionaires. We want like, and I firmly believe that, right? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that, especially sort of in the UK, where it's hard out there. It's
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
SF, and
Yeah.
I would love to talk about the difference between starting a company in the States and the UK as well. But I feel like we need to have the ability to get these sort of agents to market. Potentially something that would be a fun project for like a university student, and like university students out there, they're not going to get a job. It's rough out there, but
Why is a job the bar for a university student? Like why like
because it's
when do we
fair, right?
condition ourselves to like say getting a job at a university is success? How about starting something at a university? How about making money at a university? How about financial independence at a university?
I
Like,
think
why is that? Like, so that's it. You want to know the difference between the US and the UK? That's it.
that's it. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like in the US, like people celebrate, the ability to just like sell your way into a position of financial independence and doing whatever it is that you want to do with your life.
Oh yeah. And then
You know,
in the
it
UK,
could
it's
be
not the same.
unsavory and some shit that people don't want to do, but you're doing it, you're rocking it, and you're living the way you want to live.
Yeah, and this is it. And in the UK, I mean, I'm a founder, and I'm from Coventry, which is not the most successful city. I'm going to the pub in Coventry to some school friends. Like, why the fuck are you doing this? Like, you had such a good job.
Yeah.
You're just like no one. Someone's they might not buy it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, good point. But like when you dial that back, I think a lot of it is fear, and I think a lot of it actually ultimately is like the British culture is not obsessed with like it's not cool to be successful. You kind of
Mm,
want to be among other people, and you don't want to be the upper class. There's a big class system here, which
interesting.
doesn't necessarily exist in the US. So I think that it is a little more complicated. But the reality is, something has to give. And my fiance is American,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's very easy for me to jump on a plane. But I would love that actually paid becomes the route where actually we get Britain sort of building stuff again, and the stuff is not going to be cars because that ship is sailed. That's not coming back from China.
Right, right, right,
But
right.
actually, sort of, we're in a world where I can talk to an AI and it gets something out. You have a real problem, you have the opportunity to sell it. So I'm hoping that one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and actually we spoke about
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
I always saw paid as a mechanism to be a launchpad for me to do something important,
Mm,
which actually was probably in my head going to be a defense company.
mm.
But sort of actually being closer to the space and talking to a lot of people who are working on this, they're sort of solving real problems that I think are going to make everybody's life better. And that's like the very positive vision of AI
Yeah, yeah.
that I hope that we can sort of push, because there's a real fucking dystopian version as well,
There
which is going to be pretty dark.
there is, and it bothers me because like the dystopian version of AI robs everyone from agency, and I really don't like that because I so like I when I moved, I'm from Ecuador,
Okay.
and I moved to the U.S. as my way out. Like to me, moving to the U.S. was destination, right?
I
Um,
can't imagine that's easy either from Ecuador,
no,
right?
it's super hard.
Yeah.
Like so I have to I have to transfer university, and then I have to get a job, and then through the job, like become a citizen, etc.
Hmm.
Eventually, I set up my life in the U.S. But the thing that attracted me to the US is that I can stay in Ecuador and make good money as a programmer,
Hmm.
supporting modules of SAP or Oracle or Microsoft or whatever, and be like, tier 3 support. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
In which I build a module for like a customer, and then I'm their bitch
Hmm.
for all intents and purposes. I wanted to actually build the software. I wanted to
Yeah.
like write the software where it was source. So I moved to the US, and then what the enchanting thing about that system is that anybody can be millionaire. Like, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're from,
Hmm.
you have a chance. You have a chance just like everybody else. And I think that dream has been diluted a little bit over the last few years. Like, it's
Yeah.
not the same that it was before. And capitalism only works if we all have an even chance at
Yeah.
becoming a millionaire.
Yeah.
And like agents gives us that chance. And
Yeah.
we are the conduit by which anyone can get paid building agents. Software did not do that. You see what I mean? Because it now immediately like VCs and all, it was super complicated, whatever, whatever. Agents now perform service work. So all of a sudden, software went from being like a tool that you can sell to people to like something that can take over actual services, scheduling services, laundry services, car washing services. All the things can potentially have agents. And now you can build one for that particular industry and make money and become a small millionaire. You don't have to be a big millionaire. You can be a small millionaire and be financially independent. Like that's what I feel like we're bringing to the world. Like we are, built it, we're like rebuilding the foundation of capitalism to make sure that it thrives in this world of agency.
Yeah, and like I feel like capitalism gets a bad rep for decent reasons as well. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's all wrong, but fundamentally, I think like capitalism plus strong competition actually works very well. Like I feel like the issues with capitalism come down to competition. I bet you people would have much less of a problem with Zuck and Facebook or Meta if there were five other competitors they can move to and not actually worry about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the bar has been so high, and actually, I remember I I was so intimidated by raising my first round for my first company, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, yeah, as I said, go there, tail between the legs, like, please do some money. And there's like so much out there to do it, but like that is unavailable to the majority of the population.
Yep.
It seems easy to us. You walk in and you raise some money,
Yeah.
but it's not. But the reality is, they can be the real winners.
Right.
Imagine that you raise something, you build something. You don't even have to learn how to code at this point. Maybe you do at the moment, but that's not going to be true in
Right.
6 months to a year.
Wait 2 months.
Yeah, exactly. It's going that pace. You solve a real problem. The florist is going to experience problems that we are not aware of.
100%.
And they now have the ability to do this, which is great. It solves their own problem. And now, where I say I hope, I'm so confident. There's no doubt in my mind. We slot in. They've taken that and they can apply it and actually make it easier for every other florist. Hopefully, there are more florists there. Gets people into it,
100%.
and they're making money themselves. So I hope
100%.
that sort of is my vision for it. And even if that's not the most revenue generating in the short term, long term, I suspect it is, because the alternative is going to be fucking pitchforks.
Dude, like
Yeah.
so it's really interesting because I don't even think about the pitchforks anymore. So I think about like all the possibilities. So when we launched the first launch, right? Like
Yeah.
we had all sorts of companies coming through the tram. And like one that like left me speechless is this guy who was building AI agents for car washers.
Okay.
And you're like, of course, that's a small market.
Yep.
And like, go right now on Perplexity and ask what the size of the car washing market is. In the US alone, it's like a couple billion. Why? Because everybody owns more than one car. We are like car obsessed people, and we're car obsessed people that wants their cars clean.
Yep.
Especially if you leave like, anywhere south of like, I don't know, anywhere south of like Utah or whatever, like it's super dusty. So your cars are dirty all the time. So
Yep.
you get them washed all the fucking time. Right. And this dude is tackling the membership market, right? So like, if you're gonna get more than 3 or 4 car washes, per month, you might as well buy a membership. If you are a membership, you need to be maintained, you need to be expanded, new products be brought to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's building an agent for this thing. And it's a nook and cranny that you will never think of.
Yep.
You see what I mean? Like if you were surrounded by your like London point of view,
Mhm.
where like you bring your car wash to be washed like maybe once every 2 or 3 months, if at
Mhm.
all, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you will never, guess that market. So there is all these opportunities to create massive unlocks in relatively, constrained markets that will make somebody very rich.
Yep.
And like if you're an angel investor and you put, I don't know, $1 million into that company, and that company starts spitting out cash, after $100 million, to the tune of like, giving you back, a few $100,000, a month from dividends.
Yep.
That's a very good investment.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So like there is all this like, nothing has to be a home run in the trillions of dollars and expect like to be whatever. Like we chose that path.
Yep.
You see what I mean? But there's other paths that you can choose.
And we chose that path because it's what we know,
It's right.
right? But like the car wash person, like that might be what they know. They know how to wash cars.
100%. And that person may have a better lifestyle than we do.
Yeah.
We're sitting here grinding like every day. Like the 9 and 6, that shit is adorable. You see what I mean? Like for the rest of us, I feel like we grind every day. You see what I mean? And they don't have to grind that hard, and they're still gonna get a good outcome. And that is what excites me. Like these opportunities are now available to everyone again. You know what I mean? Like since the birth of the internet, nothing has done like that until now.
Manoj is one of our co-founders, along with Arnon, who's a little bit sick at the moment, but he's I'm sure going to join us on a future one of these. Yeah, do you want to tell us about your story, like how you found sort of working with us for the past, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months?
So I wanna preface this by saying Manoj was living like a king. So when I call him, he was being carried uh to his elephant, where he was gonna survey his kingdom. Yeah. On an afternoon stroll before getting on with his day. So
You've given up a lot, man.
you're giving up a lot. So why grind it again?
And it was sunny.
Yeah. It's, and in all honesty, it is not too far. When Manny called and said, "Hey, this is the problem I'm thinking about," I said, "That's a cool problem. Let me think about it. I'm gonna call you if I can't stop thinking about it." Those are exactly my words. And then it was like 2 days, 2 bloody days. I couldn't think about anything else. I was actually in an event with like so many people. Had a few drinks, and then I came out and called Manny. I said, "Hey, I'm taking the flight and coming, flying down on Monday. Let's sit down and hash it over, see if it's worth it." And the 7 months has been crazy. I don't know if for people who don't know, I've moved from India to England back, back to England, back from retirement. this is like, I don't know, I feel like I'm seeing the purpose of like, it's really hard to put it, right? As a founder, you wake up every day. You wake up every day as a founder, and sometimes you think, "Why the fuck am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Doing nothing." Right? That is like a really, really hard thing. So building this has been like the best thing so far. It's been crazy, right? I think I'm enjoying the time with all of you guys, and it's been crazy. Keeps the mind really sharp. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought that when Manoj and I met, he had like a catalog of fucking ideas. And like 2/3 of them were like, that will never fucking work. And funny enough, they're actually working right now. Like a lot of the things that we're doing, especially for CPQ and billing and shit like that, were things that Manoj was talking about. And I was like, that's super exciting. I'm sure I can pitch this and raise a good round out of this, but I don't know that we can build it. Um, and then and then when you came into my life, the optimism around what's possible with LLM like, just completely changed my mind, and, like, now I feel like a kid in a candy store, like, anything we can think of, if it's not possible now, it will be possible soon enough. You know what I mean?
I think actually for like anyone in this space, like just work on that assumption. Like what I'm able to do today, even a few months ago, wasn't there. And I feel like we're sort of seeing this in the product. And I think, yeah, I feel like also as well, like you've come from, yeah, for the background, like Manoj essentially built out Salesforce billing and taking that out. I'm assuming there was sort of a lot of stuff you wanted to do in your head just wasn't possible, right? And you get to sort of go again with like the benefit of like foundational like models set to help us.
Definitely, I think that, and also the one reason, of course, is like unfuck everything I created. But to be honest, it's like basically just undo all the mistakes and create and do new mistake. That's the life of a founder. So definitely, yeah. This is like I think I can relate it back to Avatar, right? When Avatar the movie was being created, James Cameron couldn't actually do everything he wanted. He had an idea, and this was germinating for about 10 years. And then when the technology was ripe, and then he started building it. And this is what we probably are talking about tons of shit which can't be built today, but probably in 6 months' time, this is all going to be possible quite easily.
Yeah.
And nobody can do that.
So it's super interesting because I ended up in Seattle out of business school because I went to business school on 2001, and that's when 9/11 happened. So 9/11 is like I'm 2 weeks into school, and like a flies into the Twin Towers. So like all the jobs that I was promised and the big bounty of land of milk and honey that I was gonna get out of coming out of Harvard like disappear, poof, gone. Like with it.
So just I'm assuming some of our users are going to be on the younger side. So that's just because everyone assumes now the US is at war, right? And
Everybody assumes
yeah,
it's a war and like
okay,
the economy is never gonna be back
right,
and
okay.
like um people started contracting like all the
Mhm.
jobs that we used to be super available to grads like we're not available anymore. So when I come out, like one of the people that are still hiring strong as if nothing had happened is Amazon. And I ended up working for this guy called Andy Jassy, who was the CEO, and through a number of other, through a number of other leaders. And the thing that was so interesting was how the birth of AWS and AWS took 13 years from like inception to actually turning into something that popped the stock. And it was so fascinating. There was never doubt in anyone's mind, especially in leadership, especially in Jeff or Colin Breyer or Andy Jassy or like anybody who was involved in like this thing will be a thing. And that the fact like, you shouldn't be buying compute. You shouldn't be buying rack space. You shouldn't be like putting, iron yourself. Like this will be on demand. And the question was when, not if. And if it took 13 years, so be it. Nobody knew how long it was gonna take. And to the point that, dude, there was a point in which Amazon almost ran out of money as a public company. And the only thing that saved it, and nobody talks about this shit, the only thing that saved it was a convertible note from Warren Buffett.
Okay.
And the only one who got rich out of that was Warren Buffett because he got, a note that literally he got paid first ahead of like debtors and ahead of the equity. And he had a coupon that accumulated and he got the to write up the appreciation of the stock. Warren Buffett always gets paid. Always remember that. So he he wrote a note and a convertible, a premium, a different kind of security. And we were able to write out like the entire debacle of 9/11, build AWS, and then out of that, Warren Buffett got paid, and AWS became the standard for the cloud.
Cool. I think Manish has to run, so
Parting word.
yeah.
Go close.
I think
Yeah.
I think this is probably the life everyone should live. I think if you're a founder, this is exactly the life you guys should be living, because you're living, you're building the future, and then you're either dreaming about building the future or building the future. There are only two phases to it. That's it. That's all it should be.
100%.
So
Which is basically, yeah, wrapped up my startup, had a co-founder breakup, but Palantir stock was doing great. I'd spent 5 years at Palantir. I was like, fuck it, I'm done.
Yeah.
And now I think I took like 9 months off, and it hit me that I am going to die or build $1 billion company. And I know, like, it hit me inside, like, and it took that 9 months of reflection, like, I am not going to stop until that happens. And I think that's kind of, my fiance says, I mean, this is the American in me. This is like the sort of hope there. And I think that for certain people, it's just like we're in the pets.com era and in the AWS era, where it's like,
Exactly.
it's not, and it's not even compute anymore, though. It's intelligence.
100%.
Intelligence on demand. I think that's it's incredible.
And like, and is the ability to find new ways to deploy this intelligence is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
So remember that that when we had the insight that you don't have to put a line of code to track what the agent is doing, you can just decorate the code
Mhm.
and figure it out. And okay, so we decorated the code, but now we're getting all this egress, and we still can't figure it out.
Mhm.
And you kept saying, just wait, let's keep going at it, like, and follow the green line of like trying and failing, or like trying and being mediocre, but keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
And to the point that we're now, so close to it, or even like done with it, that we can get to the point of what the Ben Siegelman guy, who like, was the co-founder of OpenTelemetry, said, of like, can you instrument code without touching it, or like with one line of code? Now we're at the point we can instrument code with a fucking prompt, dude.
Mhm.
Like, that is crazy talk.
Yep.
You see what I mean? You can just tell cursor or V0 to just like instrument whatever you're building, and off you go. You're done. You know what I mean? Like,
Do you know, I think this is actually, yeah, with outreach, obviously you got further than I do in my last job. And this is one of the beautiful things that I'm learning that I love. Eventually you have to let go, right? It's like, it's not just our company here, it's everyone's his company. We have a bunch of people working here doing incredible work. But you were surprised by shit. When someone first showed me this like auto instrumentation, I thought we were like at least 6 months away.
yeah.
So yeah, the rate of sort of improvement is amazing. And I think that I don't want to all put it down to sort of model improvements as well. I think we are figuring out some interesting things, but I think the main thing is, and coming back to the fear thing, you got to ask the questions. If you're not knocking on the door, you're never going to sort of have these breakthroughs.
100%. But I think a lot of that comes from, like, I don't know if it's you or your Palantir experience, but you have some like very strong like dictums that you like throw out without knowing you're throwing out. So for instance, you always talk about alpha,
Mhm.
right? And like, you build what gives you alpha, otherwise you fucking buy it or build it poorly. And this goes counter to what I had at Outreach, for instance,
Yeah.
in that for us, coding was a craft.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, we had a value that was craftsmanship,
Mhm.
in that everything you do has to be done with care and tenderness and whatever. But you have to pick what you're gonna go do. You see what I mean? Like, for instance, if you decide that you're gonna go build your own instrumentation and you're gonna build your own metering, and you put a lot of craft into it, there is fuck all alpha in that.
Mhm.
You see what I mean? So why are you gonna spend time doing something that has zero alpha? So like, the orientation towards, one of the things that we did is like, we oriented towards craftsmanship, which I guess it was, our best guess at the time. Our orientation here is towards winning.
Mhm.
So whatever doesn't get you to win it, you can easily deprioritize, buy, or build poorly, and who cares? You see what I mean?
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, only alpha matters.
Yep.
And when you're only building alpha, that creates a different priority, that creates a different culture, that creates a different kind of thing of what you're building.
Yeah. And actually, I think the thinking sort of about my last startup, like one of the things is we were only going for beta. We were going to sort of like, track the sort of stuff that was there and do okay. And like ultimately that was from fear. And actually a great thing to get rid of the fear is you try to do the thing that protects you from like failing, and you fail.
Yeah.
Then you're like, wow, there's that. And then you sort of start to see a lot of stuff that Palantir was doing that seemed insane.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there's these playbooks here and we should just follow these playbooks and do well. And that's maybe in the first year of work. And then you sort of work there a little longer. And you're like, oh, actually, they're all wrong. They're all wrong. Like, we know we're right and we have the confidence. We don't have to talk about it
Yeah.
because we're busy winning.
Dude, I am so like, it's so interesting. There's so many things that you have made me aware about Palantir that is still like taboo. So for instance, like the whole forward deploy engineer,
Yep.
most people think, oh, it only works at Palantir where the contracts are, bazillions of dollars and you can like fly people out and whatever. Every single one of our, 10 or so engineers have been forward deployed
Mhm.
and nobody died.
There's
We learned a shit ton.
an interesting concept on this is like bandwidth, I think of it, right? So what you'll traditionally sort of see the setup is you'll have like customer research, product managers, talk to the customers and stuff, and feeding it to the devs in the form of tickets and stuff like that. That's incredibly low bandwidth.
Yeah.
Right. So like an engineer being there, like talking to them, and then there is like that is contained within the head. Like you're losing essentially zero information there. And guess what? Big secret. Engineers can talk to people. They can figure this out. Like they don't need to be locked in a cupboard. They can get shit done. So I think that it's kind of how we got there as an industry where, you need a product manager to be successful. Let's, hire a bunch of product people. I think that like generally I don't see why we need to do that.
It's funny because so first of all, information theory tells you
Mhm.
that the more number of hops that you have between systems, you will lose fidelity of the signal.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So like by definition, having a lot of people between you and the customer
Yep.
will fail.
Yep.
Right. So put that aside. Second thing is that I love that nobody gets it because that's alpha. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're doing what everybody else is doing, then you're beta, right? Then you try to do a little bit better, a little bit faster. But if you're doing something that nobody else is doing,
Yep.
that's by definition alpha. And
Yep.
and like the fact that we get into our customers' code base,
Mhm.
we implement it for them,
Mhm.
and now we're down to the point that we are, we're creating a group that will not only help our customers put the paid into the code, but then help their sellers
Yep.
sell agents.
Yep.
To the point that we're only selling results. Nothing in between us and results are there. Like we deliver you the full results. That's fucking beautiful. Like this is Alex Karp's line. It's like now you're having sex that feels like love,
Yep.
as opposed to sales like feels like something else.
And I think that the beautiful thing as well is like, you sell something and, the reward is not what we thought at the point of sale.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
We're going to go and figure that out. Like the customer is going to have the problem solved. They're going to be treated with dignity.
Yep.
They're going to be listened to, and we are going to learn a bunch in the meantime.
Yep.
I think it just like, it works for everybody. And there's so much sort of literature out there around scaling. Guess what? When we scale, we can read that. But trust me, like I was talking to someone who actually I think is probably going to end up working at Pay pretty soon. He's talking about, oh, I was working at a seed stage, it didn't really work. Might go and look at like a Series A now to see how to scale. I was like, trust me, when you get to scale, you'll figure that bit out. That first bit is the hard bit, and it's brutal. So
100%. And
don't worry about there until you get it.
dude, like, and then not only that, but like the moment you work at a scale startup,
Mhm.
you're living with their mistakes because it's really hard to correct the initial condition mistakes as you're scaling. Because now you got to put points on the board. So the moment you raise a Series B,
Mhm.
you are a contender to go public. So
Mhm.
Series B is only raised so you can raise a C. And the only reason you raise a C is so you can be a public candidate. So that whatever you did in the between seed and A is where you're locking in. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
But that's a time of like defining how straight the tree is going to grow.
Yep.
You see what I mean? If you ended up crooked just to put points on the board and you try to grow crooked by putting more points on the board, you screwed, dude.
So what do you mean by like saying crooked? You mean like sort of quid pro quo little sales and stuff like that? Or?
No, like quid pro quo. Everybody does quid pro quo sales. I sold to public companies on a quid pro quo basis. It's like,
Okay, fair.
like,
Yeah.
everybody does that. No, it's more about like sales efficiency,
Right.
technical debt, operational debt,
Mhm.
like culture in general. Like what are you going to devote enough time? So for instance, this literally happened last week, and this is why I love Atta to fucking pieces, dude. Like
Yeah.
I need to see him here. So anyway, he came out. I don't know if you remember this piece. Like this really struck me, and I've been telling everybody about this, especially when I get a few drinks in that he came out and said, we deployed these customers like 3 months ago, and the technology that we have right now is significantly better than when we deploy the customers. I think I need to go and redeploy those customers again.
Mhm.
Dude, that's fucking magic. Nobody does that.
Yep.
You see what I mean? Like any public company right now, take Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, whatever. They gave you a code or whatever it was that they did to get you over the line, and you're stuck with it. They're not gonna come back and fix you. They don't give a fuck about you.
Yep.
You see what I mean?
Mhm.
Whereas we really care about the fact that, look, we sold results. We have better results now, and we're like we have a like a Hippocratic oath,
Yep.
like a doctor. Like we're gonna make you better because we can. We found new science, and we're gonna fucking give it to you whether you like it or not
Yeah.
because that's our duty. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
When you operate out of a point of duty and a point of pride, it creates different behavior, and like
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. And I think that when I think about like what I do, and a lot of it comes down to incentive alignment. When the team is incentivized to win, so everyone here has equity, so
Yeah.
it's everyone's winning. We want our customers to win because that's great for us. Like everyone works together. No one told Atta to go and do
I
this.
know. He came
Uh,
out of like out of
yeah,
his own like volition. He like came out and said that. I was like, holy fuck, that's
yeah.
amazing.
I think that like everything else, if it falls apart, I'm still so confident just because I think we have a really strong culture here. I don't know. I feel like a really interesting part of that, and unfortunately, news are here, but like the story of paid actually there's a fuck ton of argument. Me and Manoj were going to kill each other at many points, right? And I think that's another thing that I have learned personally. Whereas one of the reasons my last startup fell is that I was not up for fighting. I was just like, yeah, we'll just go over it and stuff like that. But I find that one of the interesting things is where you sort of, with people with a little more experience have done this before, it's not about 996, which I think is very, very rarely true. It's more so actually, let's figure this out. Let's be grown-ups about it. Sometimes that's fighting.
Yeah.
But actually it means the sort of relationship is a lot more pure. There's not things being hidden from each other.
100%.
We know that we've had some pretty shit chats ourselves. It happens. And I think that's one of the things that I took away as well. And my biggest points of growth. And I used to like, I used to not sleep for weeks after I've had somebody. And like, I still struggle with it. But actually what you're saying is like, I'm doing it because it's best for everyone. Like the person who's there and it's not working, they're not having fun.
Yeah.
No one here is having fun. So I think, that ability to sort of do the hard thing, I think is so important. And like, potentially, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, like, comes as a second time sort of founder.
I think it does come as a second time founder. I think it also comes from, and this is left field, it comes from being married.
Interesting.
And that, you know, I've been married twice.
Okay.
And now that I'm in my second marriage, I learned a lot of like living with each other is giving each other grace.
Hmm.
And sort of like not assume that whatever happened in the heat of the moment is how you are. Like he's a being of like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like you have these big things. It's more about like, okay, so you were heated. Let's walk away from it.
Hmm.
Let's come back in a minute and like, let's give ourselves some space.
Yep.
Come back to it with like no presumptions. Like just forget it. Like,
Yep.
throw away that conversation,
Hmm.
revisit that conversation fresh and see if it goes somewhere. And that has worked wonders in the growth of my own relationship. Like, we don't talk about this, but like I moved here because of my wife.
Hmm.
You see, I wasn't like, look, dude, I'm Captain America. I fucking love the US. Like I built a company there. I know how to build companies there. Like I know my way around it, etc. So I came here was a little bit of fish out of water. Right? Like
Mm.
I think the ability to be in a new environment also gave me some inspiration, right? So like I only
Mm.
appreciated that after landing here. I'm like, oh my God, like everything in London is beautiful. I'm walking everywhere. And it also gave me some time and space to reflection. Like average has been a 12-year like nonstop go 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 go. Whereas here, like I have more time to think. Have more space. We raise big rounds. And on the family front, like I also learned that you know not all conversations are easy, but hard conversations are needed. But hard conversations only come if you give yourself space and grace and the benefit of the doubt. You see
Yep.
what I mean? You get into like a bit of this,
Yep.
and then you walk away, you forget it, and come back to the same problem, maybe with a different perspective. And like with the same love and intention that you had in the past,
Yep.
and just literally like, and I think this came out of I forget what the name of the TV show was, like Dia Goldfish. You just have a short term memory on the
Yep.
shit that it bothers you. And then you just come back to it. And I remember like when we had that long walk, remember after I sent the yellow alert on
Oh yeah. Yep.
and
Yep.
we had that big conversation. And like I thought that was a big unlock for us
Yeah.
because you were super pissed about like a catalog of things.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, let's get into it.
Yeah.
And the talking through it
Mhm.
alone was a big unlock.
And I think like
It-
for me
it-
personally, after that conversation, it was very helpful for me in trusting you, that knowing that actually I could come to you with something that is not nice.
Yeah.
I was
You were
real pissed
raging.
off.
You were fucking
Yeah.
pissed. Yeah.
And actually, yeah, we came out of it better. And I think it worked really well in the sense that you acknowledged that there was some things you could have done differently, but actually it came back to me. It was like, oh, okay, I'm very angry, but like a lot of this is on me. And it sort of pushes me to sort of like, take responsibility, which, you always plan to do.
Yeah.
You always say, I take responsibility, but then doing it, putting your hands up to your team, say, hey, I fucked up here.
Yeah. And
It's sort of
well,
there.
okay. And like the thing is that startups are because the startups are so hard and we're gonna fuck up
Mhm.
and we're gonna get heated and like, I think it's all fine. Like,
Yeah.
as long as we as long as
In fact, I'd be more concerned if that didn't happen
100%.
because then it's just a job, right?
100%,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And I feel like that's one of the things that we did really well at my previous startup. And like we, as founders, like we brought the hardest fucking things to the table at all times. To the point I think we we actually did it a little bit too much. But like it's with the benefit of age and the benefit of being married for the period that I have, is that I now understand what gets like the relationships are this very long arc. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
And arc is built on top of trust and getting through problems. You see what I
Mhm.
mean? Not accumulating problems and ignoring them. Like just putting the problem on the table, resolving it somehow over a period of time, and then like moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a benefit of age and being a second time founder.
Yeah. I definitely see that. I think that an interesting one that it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on as well, sort of coming back to the 996,
Mm-hmm.
where how do you sort of balance that, right? Like, you've got a family and stuff like that, and I see the sort of the work you put in. How do you make that work? Because I think that it's a struggle for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I think that we need to get away from memes as a way to rule your life.
Yeah.
I think that everybody needs to go back to principles
Yeah.
and what moves the needle. So um, it's so interesting, and I think that you will appreciate this. At the end of the day, what moves a startup forward is revenue.
Yes.
Full stop. So if you have a week in which you do fuck all and close $1 million deal,
Mm-hmm.
is that a good week or a bad week?
I say good week.
100%
Yeah.
it is.
Yep.
So, you know, unfortunately, and this is, Ben Horowitz's best line, life is unfair. And effort does not equate results.
Facts
Effort,
don't give a fuck about your feelings.
nobody cares. Nobody cares about you.
Yep.
So you could put, 9 and 6, forget 9 and 6. It's starting with like 12, 12, 7. How about that? But if that doesn't yield results, then what's the point?
Yep.
You see what I mean? So I feel like we are oriented towards the wrong thing.
Yep.
You see what I mean? Like, sure, you need to teach a bunch of kids to be disciplined. The army does that. If
Yeah.
you want to be disciplined, join the Navy. If you want to get results, think about results. Think about results all the fucking time. Not 996, but
Yep.
24, 24, 24/7.
I also think as well, like, you gotta trust the people around you.
100 fucking.
And it's like you gotta trust that they want to win.
When was the last time you had a great idea in a meeting?
I mean, it comes up, yeah, fairly often.
Dude, like you had this massive unlock. I remember because you sent a photo. You had this massive unlock in the train
Yes.
in Japan
Mhm.
overseeing Mount Fuji.
Yep.
And you literally like suck everybody. He's like, I figure out how to like do something with open telemetry that unlocks a massive.
Yep.
Were you in the office? No.
Yep. And I
And,
think
and
that
I'm not undermining the fact that we're all here. We need each other here to like resolve problems, but like things will come to you at any point in time, and we need to acknowledge that.
actually, I think that this is an interesting one on the sort of changing your environment. I think does help a lot. I think sort of see something else, and especially like when I was in Japan, just everything works kind of differently in a way that you can't explain.
Yeah.
For example, the tube was shut if you can't pay versus open when you can pay. And I was like, wow, okay, of course that makes sense, but it's not something you think about. And it just sort of, gets the creative juices flowing. And I think that we've done done a little bit of a disservice as an industry where people will take the piss. They take advantage of this. They're rocking around achieving nothing. And I think
Right.
that does scare me, but generally I think that as long as you sort of trust people and hire well, it doesn't come up like people tend to want to do the right thing.
Right.
And if you treat them with respect, I think that one of the things that I'm big on is like when you start at paid, you get a corporate card, and that's, first of all, it's very practical because I don't need 20 slacks to buy the same. Oh, but second of all, it's saying, hey, we trust you to do the right thing here. You're here because we know you're going to move the needle forward.
Right.
And unfortunately, across like my peers, I don't always see this. And I do sometimes see it's a bit of like, you will stay at the office. We will do 996 because that's how we're going to win. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that generally, I just think it's a much harder path than it potentially has to be.
Do you hear the winners come out and tweet or LinkedIn like the reason we're winning is because we're 9 and 6? Does anybody does that?
Okay, so no, but there's one on this actually where Brian Chesky from Airbnb, the founder of Airbnb, gave a chat about this, and he spoke about how COVID was a very tough time for his business, which is understandable. And he was saying, I worked from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And that's the way I want it framed, because I looked at him and I was like, first of all, no, what I'm sure he did it. I looked in his eyes. I was like, he was definitely doing it. But it's like he did it. It's not everyone at Airbnb. He led by example.
Right.
And I think that there's another thing that I see. Like, don't want to stereotype here too much, but like the people that are forcing their people to do 996 probably not living that. And I think a real weak leadership like methodology is to like ask people to do stuff that you're not willing to do.
Oh, 100%.
Here's a really left field analogy. Vince McMahon, who has done some pretty bizarre stuff. There was this. He was the chairman of WWE, and there was this wrestler Rikishi, who his finishing move was essentially the stink face. He would put his ass in his face. Some of the wrestlers were not happy with this. So what does Vince do? Comes out on stage, gets stink faced by Rikishi, and what he's saying to everybody is like, I am never going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do. And he did it. He took the ass
That
to
is
the
the
face.
most power leadership move. And like,
Yeah.
so I come from a world where I used to sell to salespeople.
Right.
And in the world of selling to salespeople, the only leader that is respected is somebody who sold something.
Yep.
So no self-respecting sales guy or gal will work for a leader who hasn't sold anything.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So like every sales leader has to go close a deal themselves,
Mhm.
go generate pipeline themselves, or get on the phone and bang some phones themselves
Yep.
to even like be in the same zip code or respect with everybody else.
Yep.
You see what I mean? And that one, and even doing that won't absolve you from all the other stuff, which is, strategizing and planning and making sure that, everyone is oriented towards the right ACV and like you have the right product and blah, 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 blah. But like not doing the work in sales is not even a starter.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So
Interesting.
like, so the world that I come from, that doesn't even exist.
Okay, so this could be a fun one then. So I often do this. I'll come to you for a coaching session, right? So one of the things on this, so it's very important to me that I continue to write code, and for these reasons, I
Yeah.
can do it. But it's also apparent to me that I have zero time to write code. So I expect a lot of sort of founders. I was talking to one of the founders of Granola in this same sort of spot. How do you sort of navigate that? Because I know you're in a similar spot as well, right?
I will manufacture a deal that I can close myself.
Yeah.
I will never. And so to me, it's a little different because I don't have a principle behind it. It's primal.
Right.
Like
Okay.
I will never ask you to do something I won't do myself.
Yep.
Like, and I used to. That's a personal value. You see,
The thing is, I feel like you know that, but the AE that potentially has just joined doesn't necessarily know this. So I think that there is an element of like demonstrating that. Is my thing.
exactly. So like, I and this is another thing that I'm doing differently. So this is why I'm not willing. So right now, like right this moment, we can go hire a bunch of A's because we have pretty certainty of product market fit,
Mhm.
right? Like right now, it's just an execution problem. But I will not let that happen until all of us in go to market, customer facing, have closed a deal ourselves.
Mhm.
And that is just because that's the kind of organization you want to build. Like the same thing that you're doing with your engineering team. You have a hard line about what is and what isn't.
Mhm.
And for me, to be customer facing and not coding, you got to be selling.
Mhm.
And if you can't sell, we'll help you. We'll help you. Like there's a lot of
Yep.
tactics to selling. There's a
Yep.
lot of coaching. There's a lot of confidence to be built. It will get you there, but it's not acceptable that you can't sell.
Oh yeah, and I think that
Even our, even like we had this conversation before, like even our forward deploys, we're gonna put into some sales training.
oh yeah,
You know what I mean,
definitely.
and that will be good for their life.
Do you know we have I don't know if you know this. We have a speech coach coming in December.
Dude, I'm so
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
so excited about that. But like, we're gonna have negotiation training, or like
Yeah.
we're all gonna read, never split the difference.
Yep.
Like we're gonna like bathe ourselves into what it's like to drive a transaction. Because you don't know how hard it is to drive a transaction until you have to drive a transaction.
Mhm.
And people ghost you. And like you think you're gonna get deal X and you get deal Y. Or like you thought you had the deal in the back, and then like somebody out of left field come and T-bones the whole deal. Like we all need to live that. You see
Yeah.
what I mean? To be able to grow the company. Because that's what winning looks like.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes this a very sort of special place to work as well. Where I think like there's a lot of sort of fear in organizations where they don't want you to leave, so they're not gonna, push you to do this. I feel like I would love if everyone here like goes off to like start a company and become a founder. Like,
Yeah, that would be
in like sort of, a few years' time the company's gonna look very different. So hanging on to people, kicking and screaming, that's not the way to go. It's like
100%.
come here, do great work. We're gonna turn you into the best founder you can possibly be. I think
100%.
is like
And that creates the kind of people you attract.
yeah.
The kind of people you attract is somebody who is, technically competent or go to market competent, and you come here to learn how to build a company.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that would be like my dream. It's like we are kind of like Palantir that is over exceeds the amount of founders they have created
Yeah.
because that's the kind of company they are.
Yeah. I think that it's the way they do that as well is just like there is no rule book and it's sort of figuring out as we go along. A bit like the sort of industry that we're in.
100%.